The text came in at 2:23 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, which is the least dramatic time for a dramatic thing to happen, and I think that is exactly why it hit the way it did. Because Wednesday at 2:23 is the dead center of the ordinary week. The hour when nothing is supposed to occur except the slow metabolism of the afternoon. And my phone lit up with her name, and the message said, "I just quit. I'm in the parking lot. Are you okay?" Not, "Are you surprised?" Not, "I'll explain later. Are you okay?" As if the person who had just walked out of a building without warning was checking on the person still inside it. Her name is Devi. She had been at the company for 2 years and 3 months, which is 4 months longer than me, which meant she was the person who had explained the filing system and the coffee machine and the specific politics of the third-floor conference room when I arrived, in the patient, thorough way of someone who understands that orientation is an act of hospitality. She sat 11 feet from my desk. We had established, over 19 months of 11 feet, the specific shorthand of people who spend more waking hours near each other than near most people they have chosen. The look across the room when something absurd happened in a meeting. The precise timing of the unspoken agreement to go get coffee. The way she would send me a single punctuation mark in the internal chat when something was too much to put into words and the punctuation said, "Everything anyway." I read the text. I looked at her empty desk. I looked back at the text. I typed back, "I don't know yet." "What happened?" She said, "I'll tell you everything. Can you come down?" I should explain the context, because Devi quitting without warning on a Wednesday at 2:23 was not, from a certain angle, surprising, and from another angle was the most surprising thing that had happened to me in a building I had spent 19 months learning to navigate. The unsurprising angle, things had been difficult for her in ways that had been visible to me, and invisible, apparently, to everyone with the authority to see them. The surprising angle, Devi is the kind of person who finishes things, who does not leave a room before the conversation is resolved, who does not submit work she is uncertain about, who once stayed until 9 p.m. on a Friday to correct an error in a report that no one else had noticed and that would have caused no measurable harm if uncorrected. She finishes things. She had left a thing unfinished in the middle of a Wednesday and was texting me from the parking lot. I told my screen I would be back and took the stairs. She was sitting in her car with the windows down, which is the detail I keep returning to, not inside the car, sealed. Processing in private, but windows down, as if she needed the afternoon air, as if she had decided to be outside and inside simultaneously while she figured out what she had just done. She looked up when she saw me, and the expression on her face was the one I had seen on her exactly once before, 8 months ago, after a meeting that had gone in a direction she hadn't anticipated and hadn't deserved. Not distress, exactly, the expression of someone standing at the edge of a thing they have just passed the point of return on, taking inventory of the far shore. I leaned against the car next to her window because there was nowhere obvious to sit, and standing felt too formal for the parking lot, and the windows down, and the Wednesday. She said, "I know how it looks." I said, "Tell me what happened." What happened was a meeting I had not been in, between her and 2 people above us and 1 person from a different department entirely, concerning a project she had been running for 4 months that had become, without her being informed of this transition, someone else's project while she was still technically running it. The meeting had been called to discuss the project's next phase. She had arrived with notes. 40 minutes in, she understood that the notes were for a project she was no longer leading, that the transition had been decided and communicated to everyone in the room before she entered it, and that the meeting was not a discussion, but a notification that had been formatted to resemble one. She said, they had already divided it. They had literally already divided up the sections among themselves. I could see it in how they were talking, They'd had this conversation before, without me, and they were having it again in front of me as a courtesy. I said, "Did anyone explain why?" She said, "Marcus said it was about bandwidth." She paused. "I have never once in 4 months missed a deadline on that project. My bandwidth has been fine." I said, "What did you say in the meeting?" She said, "I asked 2 questions and then I stopped asking questions because the answers were the kind that are designed to end asking." She looked at the steering wheel, and then I came back to my desk and I sat there for 11 minutes and I thought about what I was going to do. And then I went and found Carol and I told her I was leaving. I said, "Just like that." She said, "I've been thinking about it for 6 weeks." It wasn't just like that. Here is the thing about Devi that I had known for 19 months and that the meeting had apparently failed to account for. She is the person who notices when a system is wrong and fixes it quietly, without credit, because the fixing matters more to her than the credit. She had done this 3 times in the 19 months I had been watching from 11 feet away, a process that was generating errors no one had traced to the source. She found the source and corrected it, and mentioned it to exactly 1 person, and moved on. A client communication that had gone sideways through no one's particular fault. She drafted the repair, sent it under someone else's name at their request. Did not correct the record. The project she had been running for 4 months. She had inherited it in a state of moderate disorder, and had, by the time they redistributed it without telling her, delivered it to a state of complete order. The people who divided it up had a functional project to divide because of 4 months of her work, and the meeting had not mentioned this. I did not say any of this in the parking lot. She knew it already. What she needed in the parking lot was not an audit of her own contributions. She was not asking to be told she was right. She was sitting with windows down in the middle of a Wednesday, having done an irreversible thing, and she had texted me, "Are you okay?" and I had come down the stairs, and that was what she had needed. Someone to come down the stairs. I said, "What do you need right now?" She said, "I don't know. I've never done anything like this before." I said, "I know." She said, "Does it look insane?" I said, "It looks like someone who had been making a decision for 6 weeks and finally made it." She said, "I didn't plan today specifically." I said, "The meeting planned today specifically." She was quiet. I said, "Dev, you built that project from disorder into something they wanted badly enough to take it. The taking is information. It's not a verdict on the work. It's information about the place." She looked at me. The edge of the far shore expression had shifted slightly, something in it loosening, not resolved but no longer clenched. She said, "I keep thinking about the 11 minutes. I said, "What about them?" She said, "That I sat at my desk for 11 minutes and then I went and found Carol. And I don't know if 11 minutes was long enough to make a decision this size." I said, "How long had you been making it before the 11 minutes?" She said, 6 weeks. I said, "Then, the 11 minutes was just the last 11 minutes." We stayed in the parking lot for 45 minutes. Not the whole time talking about the meeting. We talked about the meeting, and then we talked around the meeting, and then we talked about other things in the way of people who have established that the main thing has been received and do not need to keep circling it. She told me about a job she had applied to 3 weeks ago, before the meeting, before the specific Wednesday of it, in the tentative way people apply to things when they are not yet certain they are leaving but the body already knows. First round had gone well. She was waiting to hear about the second. I said, "So today wasn't the whole plan." She said, "Today accelerated the plan. The plan existed." I said, "The meeting did you a favor." She said, "A violent favor." I said, still. She almost laughed. Then she did laugh, briefly, at the steering wheel, and the laugh was the specific kind that comes when the thing you are describing is genuinely absurd, even when it also genuinely hurts. She said, "I'm going to be terrified for about a week." I said, "Probably." She said, "And then I'll be okay." I said, "Definitely." She said, "You don't know that." I said, "I know you," which is close enough. Here is what I thought about on the stairs back up to the 3rd floor, after she drove away with the windows still down, in the direction of an afternoon that was now entirely hers to arrange. I thought about the 11 minutes she had sat at her desk. I have been sitting at my desk for 19 months with variations of the same information she had, watching the same systems, noting the same patterns, making the same quiet calculations. The difference between us is not the information. The difference is what she did with the 11 minutes after 6 weeks of accumulating it. She went and found Carol. I went back up the stairs. I do not think she was braver than me, in any grand sense. I think she had a project taken from her in a meeting that pretended to be something else, and that was the specific weight that finally resolved the calculation in a direction she had been approaching for 6 weeks. Everyone has a different weight. I have not yet found mine. I am aware of not having found it in a way I was not aware of before 2:23 on a Wednesday. She texted me at 6 p.m., 2nd round interview. Thursday, I wrote back, "The meeting did you a favor." She sent back the single punctuation mark we use when something is too much to put into words. I knew exactly what it meant. She got the job. She told me on Saturday, by text, with a precision that was entirely her, not an exclamation, not a string of capitals, just, "Thursday went well." They offered. I said, "Yes." And then, after a pause of about 4 minutes, "Thank you for coming down the stairs." I said, "Always." She starts in 3 weeks. The 11 feet between our desks is currently occupied by her monitor, her chair, the specific lamp she brought from home that made her corner of the office look like somewhere a person actually lived. I do not know what they will do with the lamp. I assume someone will move it to storage or offer it to her or leave it there until the new person arrives and claims the space. The lamp is not the point. The lamp is just the lamp. The point is that she sat for 11 minutes after 6 weeks and then went and found Carol. And the point is that she texted the person 11 feet away to ask if he was okay before she had finished processing whether she herself was okay. And the point is that she drove away with the windows down in a Thursday interview, and she was right that she would be terrified for a week and right that she would be okay. I watched someone finish something on a Wednesday at 2:23. I am still on the stairs, in the way of someone who has received information and is deciding, with more awareness than before, what to do with it. The lamp is still on. I can see it from my desk. Have you ever watched someone do the thing you had been almost doing, make the move you had been calculating, say the thing you had been almost saying, and felt something shift in you from the watching of it? Like a door you hadn't realized was closed had been pushed open from the other side? Tell me what happened next. I'll read every one.